Shalom Aleichem, Assalamu Alaikum, Irini Mazisu, Pax Vobiscum, peace be unto you, and welcome to 2 Samuel chapter 12, in which there is 31 verses. We're going to look at verse 3, talking about meat. The little ewe lamb ate meat. No, he had bread. It says he ate of his bread, not meat. He's not a cannibal. He's not eating meat. But the Old English understanding of the word meat is just food. It means food. But we understand meat as viand. It comes from animal sources. Verse 5, there's a footnote regarding shall surely die. In the Greek, this is translated as a son of death. The man that did this thing, is a son of death. So you can be a son of life or a son of death. Perhaps the son of the devil. Maybe it's an expression, a Hebrew idiom perhaps. Verse 6, this is interesting. David's verdict is that this man who took the poor man, the rich man who took the poor man's only lamb, shall restore the lamb in the Masoretic fourfold. Okay, give the man 4 lambs in exchange for this one special lamb that he treated and saw as his own daughter, as it says in verse 3, was to him as a daughter. In the Septuagint, what is the verdict? Not just 4, almost double that. 7-fold. He has to give him 7 times as many lambs for this special lamb, because it was worth so much to him. We can see his judgment is not completely gone. It's just he couldn't see the fault in himself. Verse 7. There's an omission here. Now, this is a very famous verse, and many of us know it as, you are the man. You the man. In the Masoretic, in the Septuagint, you are the man that has done this. You did this, David. You are the man that has done this. The one in the story, that's you. That is very powerful, and must have hit David like a ton of bricks. Verse 9, we can see Adonai-Yah's response to the situation. He says via Nathan, you have set at nothing the word of Adonai, versus you have despised the word of Adonai. So you didn't just hate him, you put at nothing the word of Adonai, instructions of Adonai. And then in verse 10 goes further, not just affecting the words that Adonai has spoken, but even his own reputation. You have set me at nothing, versus you have despised me. So you hated me? No, David didn't hate Adonai. He took his reputation, his own reputation, but also by extension Adonai, and turned it to nothing. What is this a breach of? The 3rd commandment, because it reads in the 3rd commandment, do not take the name of Adonai in vain. The Hebrew word for vain is shav, which means nothingness or emptiness. And this is nothingness. You have set me at nothing. He's taken his name, his reputation, and turned it to nothing, or made it ruins. He sullied the name. He's put dirt in the name of Adonai. Not only is David's reputation ruined, but even the Elohim that he serves, the Elohim of Israel. We can see in verse 14, what are the reactions of the nations around them, specifically the enemies of Adonai. They will blaspheme, according to the Masoretic, which is the Hebrew na'atz, which means to contemn, to spurn, to hate. So they will hate. They're gonna hate Adonai. Okay, I don't think they loved him before that. What is it saying in the Septuagint? You have given great occasion of provocation to the enemies of Adonai. So they're gonna provoke Israel and Adonai. Provoke him in various ways. It doesn't say how, but they will provoke Adonai. Verse 15, talking about the child. Adonai struck the child. We know the gender in the Septuagint, however. It says here, actually, which verse? It's verse 14, my fault. It says here, your son that is born to you shall surely die. So the son was already conceived, or delivered, I should say. So they could tell the child was a male. And this is a great cause for rejoicing. But not in this instance, because the son was struck ill. The one to carry David's name, or one of the sons anyway. Verse 18, talking about how David had finished his fast, and then he found out, I should say his servants found out that the male child died. And then they reasoned to themselves, how will he then vex himself? Vex means to do bad or evil to himself. And the Septuagint, it's a lot more clear. He would do himself harm. He's going to hurt himself. We thought he harmed himself already by not eating, not getting up from the earth. He'll probably do worse than that once he finds out the child is dead. Verse 20, called for bread to eat versus they set bread, I should say, when he required. Doesn't say what he required, but he actually specifically, David called for bread. He was hungry and he wanted bread. He didn't just ask for some vague food. He said, I want bread. Give me bread. So they set what he asked, which is bread, or which was bread. Verse 22. This is an interesting, it's a slight variation here, but it shows a little more of David's mindset. Let's read it from the Masoretic first. Who can tell whether Adonai will be gracious to me? So he's going to give him something he doesn't deserve. Grace. On the other hand, it reads like this in the Septuagint. Who knows if Adonai will pity me, will show mercy to him? So pity is a lot different than grace, in my opinion. I think you can see that in the English language anyway. Okay, verse 30 talks about Malcham. That's the name of the king. He took the crown of Malcham, their king, from off his head. So that was omitted, the name of the king. And then we have a very controversial verse finishing up in 31, talking about, let me just read it word for word. David brought forth the people that were in it from the city. Which city was that? Rabbah. And put them under the saw, and under iron harrows and axes of iron, and made them pass through the brick kiln. And thus he did to all the cities of the children of Ammon, and David and all the people returned to Jerusalem. So there's an interesting commentary on this. Let me pause it for a moment. Okay, welcome back. So let's read some commentary on this last verse of the chapter. This is the Benson commentary, and they bring up some excellent points. Did King David execute all the people or free the people of Rabbah? Well, it says here, David left Shobi in the government of Rabbah. 2 Samuel 17. That's moving ahead. So Shobi, the son of Nahash, was left in charge. It must be presumed that he left some besides female subjects under his dominion. So it's not a complete genocide. And it is most likely that the bulk of the people were received to mercy, and only the king and the accomplices and instruments of his tyranny suffered the chastisements due to their guilt. So 1 Chronicles 20 verse 3 actually answers the question whether what was alluded to in verse 31 actually took place. So let's read that. He brought out the people that were in it, this is King David, and sawed them asunder with saws, and cut them with iron axes and with harrows. And thus David did to all the children of Ammon. So it was done, black and white. It's very clear that actually happened, but it wasn't a total destruction. There was a remnant left. For instance, as was mentioned, Shobi was left in charge of the government. And another mentionable is not all the people were killed. It was only perhaps the men of fighting age. But I believe that the women were spared. Doesn't seem to include everyone altogether. But we can safely assume that the women were spared. I don't see anything. Okay, I'm just going to leave it at that. Whereas other commentators believe that they were not killed off, that they were ruled or governed by the saw, harrows, mines, and axes. So they were bound, according to the Syriac version, they were bound with chains, and so they served Israel. None of them were killed, but that contradicts the account in 1 Chronicles chapter 20 that they were cut in two with saws. So why would they do this? Okay, the answer is that they were cruel people on their own. So this is sending a message to the rest of the nations around them that Israel will not be treated as such, and other peoples will just get away with it. Saying you can't mess with us. That's sending a strong message. And we can see that in the Middle East even today, that for a lot of nations and people, the only language they understand is violence. You can't send a strong message by being soft or being merciful. Sometimes there is a time to show a strong hand. Not all the time, but there is a time and a place. And this was the time and the place. I'm going to read from the commentary of Kale and Delitzsch. So it says here, at the same time, the words of the text do not affirm that all the inhabitants of Rabbah were put to death in this cruel manner. This refers no doubt simply to the fighting men that were taken prisoners, or at the most to the male population of the Acropolis of Rabbah, who probably consisted of fighting men only. In doing this, David merely retaliated upon the Ammonites for the cruelties with which they had treated their own foes. According to Amos 1:13, they ripped up women who were with child. According to 1 Samuel 11:2, their own king Nahash would only make peace with the inhabitants of Jabesh upon the condition that the right eye of every one of them should be put out, should be gouged. It is sufficiently evident from this that the Ammonites had aimed at the most shameful extermination of the Israelites. Not only that, they also were known to sacrifice their children to their false Elohim. And so it was also mentioned in verse 31 that they made them pass through the kiln. So it seems that those who caused children to be burned, children and infants to be burned in the to be burned for the false Elohim, that Dawid and his men took those individuals and gave them a taste of their own medicine and burned them in the kiln. Okay, so that's all for this chapter. Thank you very much for your time. Till next time, we bid you all Shabbat Shalom, Shalom Aleichem, Assalamu Alaikum, Irini Mazisu, Pax Vobiscum, peace be unto you, and Maranatha.